How's everybody doing? My name's Mike. I'm the kids director here. I don't know how crazy it's going to get this morning, so I'm not sure what Lenny's talking about, but it might get kind of crazy. You get to hear from some kids and hear from me. Over the past few months, I've been doing research on the 5 love languages of children, so we're going to be working through that. Gary Chapman developed the 5 love languages when, over his 30 years of marriage counseling, he noticed that there are 5 categories in which people receive and communicate love. Those 5 ways are physical touch, words of affirmation, quality time, receiving gifts, and acts of service. So before we jump into that, I wanted to do this research because I've worked with kids for about 9 years now, and I'm going to be continuing to work with kids. I'm going to school at Carroll for elementary education, and I think it's a great tool for me to use in my classroom, having kids for 6 hours a day and at 9 months a year, that I can make them feel welcome and loved in my classroom, and so they can learn better. Also, I think it's a great tool for really anybody who works with kids, or this can even be applicable to friendships, parents, spouses, whatever the case may be, to just show love and to receive love. Also, Gary Chapman talks about discipline problems with children, and he talks about a love tank meaning that how much a kid feels loved. And the reason for discipline issues in children is an empty love tank. So when a kid feels loved, they're going to have less discipline issues. And when you need to discipline your kid, they're going to respond to that discipline a lot better than they would if they weren't loved or didn't feel loved. Also, when you communicate love to somebody else in a way that they hear and they feel, they're going to want to reciprocate that love back to you, and we're going to hear about that from some kids and through some stories that I'm going to be telling. Before we get started in getting into those, some things to keep in mind: if you have a kid who's under 5, don't expect to find their love language. Gary Chapman talks about that in his book. Also, a child's love language may change over time, so pay attention to that, and use all the 5 love languages in loving someone or your kids. It's their primary love language or their love language that's going to speak the loudest to them. So let's jump in. We're going to talk about physical touch first. Physical touch is more than just hugs and kisses, or giving your kid a pat on the back as they walk out the door to go to the bus, or a hug when they get home from school. It can be really anything from throwing them in the air to spinning them around to wrestling with them, roughhousing, letting them sit on your lap when you're reading a story or watching a movie, whatever the case may be. Jesus gives a good example of this in Mark 10:13 through 16. This is from the Message. He said, "The people brought children to Jesus, hoping he might touch them. The disciples shooed them off, but Jesus was irate and let them know it. Don't push these children away. Don't ever get between them and me. These children are at the very center of life in the kingdom. Mark this. Unless you accept God's kingdom in the simplicity of a child, you'll never get in." Then, gathering the children up in his arms, he laid his hands of blessing on them. A great example from Jesus. Another thing to keep in mind is your children are growing up. You may notice if you have middle schoolers or high schoolers in your class, or not in your class, well, in your house, that their need for physical touch doesn't change. It just changes the way it's expressed. So you may notice this if you try to give your kid a hug, dropping them off at school. It's not cool anymore. That's not going to be, they're going to be the brunt of jokes. So be aware of that. Marilyn learned about the 5 love languages when her son Joey was 12. And she thought about what his love language might be, and she thought about all the things that he used to do to her to pinch her, and if she was walking and he was laying on the ground, that he'd grab her leg, or if she was washing dishes, he'd put his hands over her eyes, or even when she was watching TV, he'd put his hands in her hair and play with her hair, and she made it very clear to him that she did not want that going on anymore. She didn't come from a touching family. They didn't really hug, so she didn't really know how to handle that, but he would often do it to her, or his dad, and they'd get in wrestling matches and roughhouse and play around and laugh. And so she talked about this with her husband, and he thought, wow, I've never thought about wrestling and playing around with him like that as showing love. But that makes a lot of sense. Actually, my love language is physical touch. He spoke that. And so she didn't really know how to speak physical touch and learned that her love language is acts of service. So what she decided to do was just respond to the physical touches. So the next time she was washing dishes, Joey came up and put his hands over her eyes, and she pulled her hands out of the warm, soapy water and turned around and gave him a great big hug. And this shocked Joey, but he laughed. And over time, she was reaping the benefits of showing love through physical touch. Her son, Joey, was washing dishes, and her husband was vacuuming, and she thought she had gone to heaven. So the benefits of showing love through physical touch. I also interviewed some kids from here at Narrate and asked them how they are loved and in what way communicates love best to them. So we're going to watch a video real quick on that. Do your parents love you? Yeah. Can you tell me about how they love you? What's your favorite thing to do with your parents?
Play with my mama and daddy.
Do you feel most loved when you're playing with your mom and your dad? Do they wrestle with you?
My dad wrestles.
Does your mom love you?
Yep.
Yeah. How do you know that your mom loves you?
She kisses us goodnight, always.
Does she do your hair?
Mm-hmm.
Does she help you put on makeup?
I don't put on makeup every day.
What do you love doing most with your dad? Does he ever wrestle with you? Or throw you in the air?
He does put me in the air for exercising.
Great. So that was physical touch. Let's move on to words of affirmation. Words of affirmation are something that we need to take with a lot of weight. We know that our words can tear someone down, or they can build someone up, or they can encourage or discourage somebody. So they come with a lot of weight. And children believe deeply what we say. So that's why we can point to a dog and say that's a dinosaur. And if the child doesn't know better, he'll believe us. We can deceive him on that. Proverbs 18:21 puts it this way. Words kill, words give life. They're either poison or fruit. You choose. I'm going to read that again one more time. Proverbs 18:21. Words kill, words give life. They're either poison or fruit. You choose. And the greatest thing that's going to stand in our way in showing love through words of affirmation is our anger. We all know, we all get angry, and we all know that when we get angry, our voices raise, and we want to shout and yell things that we later regret and wish we wouldn't have said. So beware of that. And I had this great piece of advice that I learned from Pam, who I interned with in Billings. She said, act before you get angry. And it's very simple but very wise. And I've held on to this for 4 years to pay attention to what's going to make you angry and what situation is going to make you angry. Or maybe your kid is doing something that you're like, okay, if this happens any longer, I'm going to go nuts on this kid. And so act before you get angry. Remove yourself, whatever you need to do, so you don't blow up on the kid. Gary Chapman talks about praising your child and being specific with your praises. So if, let's say, you're playing soccer with your kid and you ask them to pass the ball to you and they kick it right to you and you say, great kick, that was good. That's a very good specific praise. But if they kick it over your head and you say, great kick, you're communicating to them that you're just trying to make them feel good about what they did and not praising them for their good effort. Another way to encourage your kids, a really good way to do that is catch them doing something good or in the effort to doing something good. So if they feed the dog without being asked and you catch them doing that, you say, great job, good job feeding the dog. Or if they clean their room without being asked, and you just encourage them and be positive with your words. Another thing is the words I love you should always stand alone. If you say I love you with a condition, it just cancels itself out. So if I say I love you, will you please do this? It's not going to communicate love to the child. Todd is Bill and Mary's kid. He's 10, and he was very lethargic toward life. He didn't really enjoy life. He wasn't very alive or anything like that. And his parents tried everything to get him more excited about life, from getting him in sports to buying him a dog, and nothing seemed to work. And they often complained to him about his attitude, saying, well, you should be appreciative that you have parents that love you. And if you don't get more excited about life, we're going to take you to a counselor. Or you need to find something interesting so that you can develop that. And when Bill and Mary found out about the 5 love languages, they thought about how they've been loving Todd and how his attitude toward life was pretty low. And they've been giving him gifts. They've been doing things for him. They've been they haven't been encouraging him, but they've, hugged him daily. And so they've shown him love in all the 4 areas except for words of affirmation. So they decided that they'd do an experiment. For a month, they would communicate to him that it would communicate three things: that we care about you, we love you, and we like you. So over the next month, they did their best to communicate that. And they started with his physical appearance, because Todd was a very attractive kid and strong kid. So they would compliment him on his appearance, and they would refrain from things like, you're a strong boy, you should play football. So they'd stay away from that. Or if he'd take care of the dog, they would say, instead of saying it's about time, they would say, thanks for taking care of the dog. And after a month of doing this, Todd was sharing jokes with them. He was laughing and joking with them, and he was even playing football with other kids on the street. So the benefits of showing love through words of affirmation. I don't have a video for this, so we won't get to see any kids, but the next one we will. The next one's quality time. It's undivided attention. It's turning off the TV or your cell phone or whatever the case may be and focusing on that person. It could be anything from going to the park to getting ice cream to going on a road trip, going into a restaurant, whatever the case may be. And as a natural result of spending quality time with someone, you know this probably throughout your life, but also with your kids, that it brings up natural conversation about anything related to life. And quality time also creates memories that are going to last a lifetime. I know there's a lot of you in this room that can think back to your childhood and thinking of quality time that you spent with someone, your parents, relatives, whatever the case may be, and you remember those things, and you can bring those up and know that you were loved. Also, a good way to create quality time with your kids is to read bedtime stories to them. Make that an every night thing where you're reading to them and spending that time with them. Here's a story from the book, Gary Chapman, The 5 Love Languages of Children. Alan was a firefighter. He worked 48 hours on and 24 hours off. And for his 48 hours on, he stayed at the firehouse. And for his 24 hours off, he went and painted houses with a coworker. And his wife, Helen, is a nurse. She worked nights and slept days. So when they were both working nights, the kids, Susan and Jonathan, stayed with their grandma. And Alan and Helen noticed that their son Jonathan was unresponsive to conversation. He wasn't talking with them and wasn't very excited about life. So Helen talked to her friend Rosie about this, who had read the book, The 5 Love Languages, and remembered the chapter about children, and told her about that. And so Helen remembered before Jonathan started school and before she started work, that they used to go to the park almost every afternoon. And so she thought that might be the reason for Jonathan's lack of conversation, his lack of responsiveness. So she was really busy, and she decided that she would carve out, she could find 2 hours a week to spend time with him. And when she had first mentioned it to Jonathan, he wasn't that excited. But after their hour at the park, she could see that little bit of smile in Jonathan's face. And they decided that for one day of the week, they would go to the park, and for the next day of the week, they would go grab ice cream. So after 3 weeks of this, she met with her friend Rosie again, and told her about how Jonathan had become who he was again. He was responding to conversation, he was talking with them, and he was laughing with them and was excited about life. So this quality time is a big deal, and we're going to check that out from some kids. Do your parents love you?
Mm-hmm.
How do you know that they love you?
Well, I really feel loved when we go out fishing, when my dad takes me fishing, and we just go and do stuff outside. I feel loved when I like doing that kind of stuff. I like even just my mom and I go on walks sometimes, just downtown, or just when we have family movie nights. Those are fun too.
Are you shy of the camera?
No.
Not at all. Do you know if your parents love you?
Yes.
They do? How do they show you love?
by doing stuff with us.
With you?
Mm-hmm.
Like what?
Like going to the new park or walking our dogs.
Do your parents love you?
Yeah.
No?
Yeah.
Yes?
Mm-hmm.
What's your favorite thing to do with your parents?
My favorite thing to do with my parents is fish.
Go fishing?
Mm-hmm. I got 2 fish.
2?
Mm-hmm. I got 2 rainbow trouts.
Wow, were they big?
Just a little bone this size.
Okay. So those are memories that those kids are going to carry with them for a lifetime. Let's move on to the next one. It's gifts. Gifts is a little unique in that in order for a kid to see receiving gifts as a love language, they need to feel loved by their parents. So you need to use the other 4 love languages to communicate love along with receiving gifts. Gifts are not a payment or a bribe, and children don't know exactly that language, but they understand the concept. So if you say, hey, would you just sit there for 30 minutes and don't make any sound, and then we can get you a toy at the toy store. That's not receiving a gift. That's not communicating love through a gift or a bribe. It doesn't matter the size or the cost of the gift or whether the kid even wanted the gift. What matters most is that the gift is communicating that you're thinking of them. That's what the gift is communicating. So if a kid's primary love language is receiving gifts, they're going to be more than excited. They're going to be exuberantly excited about receiving this gift. They're going to jump up and down. They're going to ooh and ah over it. They're going to just love the moment, and they're going to find a spot for it in their room. They're going to find a special spot for that gift, and they're going to show it to you, show you where you put it, and they're going to show their friends where they put it, and they're going to show their friends the toy and how to use it, and all of that. Julie and her husband often travel a lot, and the 5 love languages helped her better understand her 2 daughters, Mallory 6 and Meredith 8. So Julie and her husband often go on business trips, and they bring back a gift for their kids. And when Mallory sees that gift and when she gets it, she jumps up and down with excitement, and she oohs and ahs over it, and she puts it in a special spot in her room, and she wants her mom and dad to see where it's at, and she shows her friends when they come over. Where her sister, on the other hand, although is thankful for the gift, doesn't respond to it like that. She wants to get her parents separate and get them together and ask them about how the trip was, what they did, and that just eats up the details of it, where Meredith really doesn't care so much about the details. So Julie used to be disappointed with the way that Mallory responded to receiving a gift, but now knowing now that Mallory's love language is quality time, they do their best to communicate love through quality time, and they also are still buying gifts for their daughters. She just knows that Mallory's not going to respond the same way as Meredith, and they're doing their best to teach them to show love through quality time and receiving gifts. And we're going to see what that looks like from some kids here. Do your parents love you? They're not
Yes.
here, don't worry.
Yes.
They do. How do you know that they love you?
Well, like, I get allowance every week, and they celebrate my birthday.
When you're in school, does your teacher love you?
If I'm done with my work, and I'm the first one done, she'll sometimes let me, like, do origami and stuff.
Nice. Do your parents love you?
Uh-huh.
Yeah. How do you know that your mom and your dad love you?
They play with me.
They do.
Uh-huh.
What do you like playing with?
The iPads,
What's your favorite game on there?
Ice Age, and Apple Village on there.
Oh, okay.
It's my favorite game.
That's it, Jameson.
Okay.
That's all.
That's it?
That's it. That's awesome. That's Jameson. He put him in the category of gifts because he talked a lot about the game on the iPad and how he loved playing the game and told us all about it. Next is acts of service. Acts of service is very physically and emotionally draining. If you've had kids, if you're a parent, you know this, that you signed up for a term of 18 years of service, and for a few years after that, you're on reserves. So you know that it takes a lot of energy out of you. So be sure that you're filled up. Take care of yourself first, and then serve your kids. By serving your kids, you're setting an example for them. You're showing them that they can communicate love through serving others, and you're doing that through your actions. And it has this intermediate step, acts of service does, where when your kids are ready, that you can teach them to serve themselves and to serve others. Around here at Narrate, you see Adam up here talking about the vision of Narrate, that we gather for one day of the week and we scatter for 6 days of the week. We go out and serve the community. And we also have a scattering opportunity about once a month where we go and we serve the community in one way or another. And we do our best to make those family friendly so that you can bring your kids and you can serve alongside of them and teach them how to serve and show them that serving, you can do that and love others through that. Also, when you're teaching your children to serve, give them the freedom to develop their own personality, their own skills, their own traits that are given to them by God. Be careful not to make them like you or force them to be like you or accomplish things that you wish you would have accomplished. And this correlates with the Narrate Kids vision, that each kid is uniquely made by God for God's purpose, and they're free to dream big about how God would bring the kingdom of heaven to earth. So developing those unique skills, talents, and abilities in your child. And ultimately, the purpose of acts of service is to produce adults who love others by serving them. Luke 14:12 through 14 puts it this way. This is from the Message. Then he turned to the host. The next time you put on a dinner, don't just invite your friends and family and rich neighbors, the kind of people who will return the favor. Invite some people who never get invited out, the misfits from the wrong side of the tracks. You'll be and experience a blessing. They won't be able to return the favor, but the favor will be returned. Oh, how it will be returned at the resurrection of God's people. Will and Kathy are your classic ranch folk. They're cowboys. They have 2 sons, Buck and Jake. And Will and Kathy went to a seminar put on by Gary Chapman about the 5 love languages of children. And afterwards, they went up to Gary Chapman and said, there's no way that the acts of service can be a love language, because your kids will grow up and they'll be dependent on other people and they won't be able to do anything for themselves. And Gary Chapman challenged him a little bit and asked him a few questions and asked him, do your kids know that you love them? And this stumped Will, and he couldn't answer that question. And Gary said, well, you'll never know if you don't ask. And so Will went home with that ringing in his head, and it took him a while, but he got his son Buck alone and asked him. He sat him down and said, I need to ask you something. It's really important for me to know. I've never asked you this before, but I need you to be honest. Do you feel that I really love you? And in his cowboy voice, he said, yeah, I do, Paul. And so when's that? And he said, well, I always thought it was really special how I got to spend time with you, that when we go into town, I get to ride with you, or when we're on the trail, you always make time for us to talk. And that was enough to make Will cry. And it was so emotional that it took him another week to ask his 17-year-old son, Jake, the same question. He went to his son, Jake, and said, I need to ask you a question. It's really important for me to know. I've never asked you this before, but I really need to know, do you feel like I love you? His son, Jake, paused for a while, and he said, I don't really know how to say this, Paul, but I know you love me. I just don't always feel that you love me. And Will asked, when is that? And he said, well, that time the fire started on the lower 40, and I sent Buck up to get word to have you come help us, and you didn't come. Or the time I was 10, and I asked you for help with my math, and you said that I was a smart boy, so I could do it myself, but I knew you knew how to do it, so I just really needed your help on that. The time the wagon got stuck, and I sent Buck for word to come help us, and you said that we got it stuck so we could get it out. And I knew we could, but we needed your help. And Will said, I'm sorry. I hope that you'll give me another chance. And his chance came 7 months later when the wagon got stuck, and Jake sent Buck to go get his dad to help them get the wagon out. And Buck was surprised when his dad immediately saddled up and rode out and helped them get the wagon unstuck. And after they got it unstuck, he went over to his son Jake and gave him a big hug and said, thank you for giving me another chance. And that day, Will learned a big lesson. And I want you guys to hear from some kids on what acts of service looks like. So we'll take a look at the last video.
Do your parents love you?
Yes,
How do you know?
because they love me.
Well, what do they do?
They take care of me.
Like what? Give me an example.
They feed you and they do other stuff like that.
And what about your teacher at school last year? Did she love you?
I didn't go to school, I don't think.
Yeah. Yes. So we've talked about the 5 love languages. We've kind of got those in a little bit about each one of those. And now we want to find out how we can find out what someone's love language is. The first thing is to watch how they express love to you and to others. So does your kid try to hold your hand or hang on you or give you a hug? Or do they say nice things about you? Or do they try to vacuum or wash the dishes for you? Whatever the case may be, watch out for that and pay attention and maybe take some notes on how they express love to you and to others. Also, listen to what that person requests most. Do they ask for more time with you? Do they ask to go somewhere with you? Do they ask for a present? Or maybe even they want a letter from you. Next is to notice what your child complains most about. So do they say, you always spend so much time with the baby, we never get to spend time together, or we don't go to the park anymore, or we used to do this, but now we don't do that anymore. So keep track of that, and if that falls into a pattern, into a certain love language, that's pretty indicative on what it may be. Also is to give a choice between 2 options. So this may be, I'm getting off work early today, would you rather us go to the park and play basketball, or would you rather me fix your bicycle? Or would you rather us go to ice cream, or would you rather me go help you pick out a new pair of shoes? So gifts, quality time. Next is the 15-week experiment. This is something that takes a lot of dedication, a lot of time. It's picking one love language. So let's take quality time, for example, and speaking love primarily using quality time for 2 weeks and just paying attention to how that person or your child responds to that love. And then for the 3rd week, you're going to take that week off and you're going to communicate love using all 5 love languages. And then you're going to pick another love language and you're going to use that for the next 2 weeks. Just focus primarily on that, using that love language to communicate love, and take note of how that person responds to that love and how they react to it. So those are some ways on how to find the 5 love or how to find someone's love language. For those of you who've heard of it, I hope that this is kind of a new perspective on how to use it. And for those of you who haven't, I hope this is a good tool for you to maybe show and receive love. Just try it out, see how it goes, and use it. I'm going to pray, and Sarah's going to jump up here. Jesus, thank you so much for this day, and thank you for all these people, for this tool that we get to learn about from Gary Chapman, that on ways that we can communicate and receive love, and just the power of love in our lives and how it affects us and how we can communicate it. And thanks for the examples. And I just pray over all the families and the children here, and ask that you'd bless them and watch over them. And Lord, we love you, and it's in your name that we pray. Amen.